Your ship, the Stargazer, was cataloging empty space. Just another Tuesday in the void. Then the probe pinged. It had found something in the Xylos system, anomaly detected on the third planet. The world was a barren rock, devoid of life, devoid of anything interesting at all. Or so you thought. The probe's camera feed filled the main screen. It showed rust-colored dust and jagged canyons, standard boring planet stuff. The flight director zoomed in. The image sharpened. And there it was, lying in the red dust, a collection of bones. They looked impossibly familiar. You leaned forward in your command chair. Your heart began to pound a little faster. Those were not alien fossils. They were human. You felt a chill crawl up your spine. A human skeleton. Here, millions of light years from Earth. It was impossible. Absolutely impossible. Your ship was the first to ever visit this system. No colony ship had ever been lost in this sector. No explorer had ever charted this deep. The comms channel was silent. Everyone on the bridge stared at the screen. They were all thinking the same thing. How could this be? The flight director turned to you. Her face was pale. "Captain," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "What are your orders?" You took a deep breath. Your mind raced through 100 logical explanations. Each one fell apart. "Get a sample," you said. "I want those bones in our lab." Now the lab was sterile and white. It felt like a hospital waiting room. Dr. Eris held the bone fragment with a pair of sterile tongs. He rotated it under the scanner's blue light. The ship was quiet around you. The entire crew seemed to be holding its breath. You stood with your arms crossed, watching the data stream across the large monitor. Numbers and graphs scrolled past. Things you didn't understand. But Aris did. His eyes widened. He muttered something under his breath. "What is it, Doc?" you asked. "Tell me it's a rock formation. A really convincing one." Aris turned from the scanner. He looked right at you. "It's not a rock, Captain." He set the bone fragment down. "It's human. 100%. He pointed to a number on the screen. A very, very large number. And the carbon dating, it's definitive. You stared at the display. The numbers seemed to swim. "How old?" you asked, dreading the answer. "Older than our first trip to the moon," Aris said softly. "Older than the pyramids. Older than the first cities." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "These bones are over 100,000 years old." A silence fell over the lab. The hum of the ship's life support seemed loud. 100,000 years. Humanity hadn't even left Africa back then, let alone the solar system. "That's not possible," you whispered. Aris just shook his head slowly. "The data doesn't lie, Captain. It's impossible. And yet, it's true." The landing craft cut through the thin ochre sky of Xylos. You were strapped into your seat. Beside you, Sergeant Eva Rostova checked her rifle. She didn't expect trouble, but she was always prepared. Below, the red desert stretched to the horizon. It was a dead world, but a dead world with a secret. The craft touched down with a gentle bump. The ramp lowered. A wave of air washed over you. You took a cautious sniff through your helmet's external sensors. The computer chimed in your ear. Oxygen levels, safe. Nitrogen, safe. No toxins, no contaminants. You looked at Rostova. She looked back, her eyebrows raised. You both knew what that meant. You could breathe here. You gave the order. Helmets off. The air was cool and thin. It tasted of dust and ancient stone. But it was breathable. Another impossibility to add to the list. The silence was the strangest part. On any living world, There's sound, the chirp of an insect, the rustle of a leaf, the whisper of the wind. Here, there was nothing. A total, profound silence that felt heavy. It felt wrong, as if the entire planet was holding its breath, waiting. Your team moved out in a loose formation. Your boots crunched in the red dust. Every step sounded like a gunshot in the oppressive quiet. The probe had landed a few hundred meters away. Its metallic shell gleamed under the alien sun. And next to it, the reason you were here. The skeleton was laid out carefully, as if it were sleeping. It was complete, every bone in its place. The red dust coated it like a burial shroud. It was a work of macabre art. You knelt beside it. Your science officer, Jian, began her scans. Her tricorder whirred softly, the only sound in the universe. The skeleton's posture was strange, deliberate. It wasn't the result of a random fall. It had been arranged, positioned. One arm was stretched out, its bony fingers extended. You followed the line of its hand. It pointed upward, toward the pale daytime sky. You looked up, following its silent direction. It pointed to a faint speck of light. A distant star, almost invisible against the sun's glare. Your helmet's display automatically tagged it. Uncatalogued star system, uncharted territory. Jian broke the silence. "Captain, look." She was pointing at the skeleton's other hand, the one not aimed at the stars. It was curled into a loose fist, as if it were holding something. You leaned in closer, tucked beside the skeleton's hip, half buried in the dust, was a stone. You brushed the dust away with your gloved hand. It was smooth and black. Not a natural rock from this world. It was perfectly shaped, an oblate spheroid, like a flattened egg made of polished night. It had no seams, no markings, nothing to indicate its origin or purpose. You reached out to touch it. "Captain, wait," Jian warned. "It could be dangerous." You hesitated for a second. Then you placed your bare hand on its surface. It was cool to the touch, and it was humming, a low, deep vibration that you felt in your bones. It was a feeling of immense power, held in perfect stillness. The silent planet suddenly didn't feel dead anymore. It felt like a tomb. Back on the Stargazer, the bridge was buzzing with low conversation. The impossible was piling up. 100,000-year-old human on a dead but breathable world, pointing to a random star. And now, this artifact, this perfectly smooth, humming stone. You placed it on the central holographic map table. It sat there, absorbing the light, a small piece of darkness in the brightly lit room. "Anything, Jian?" you asked. She shook her head. Her brow was furrowed in concentration. "It's inert. The scans show nothing. No power source, no technology. It's just a rock." "I felt it hum," you insisted. It was vibrating. Rostova, standing guard by the door, chimed in. "Maybe you just need more coffee, Captain." It was a fair point. You hadn't slept much. But you knew what you felt. You trusted your gut. You looked at the star map. The holographic display showed your current position. It showed the route back to Earth. And it showed the faint, uncharted star, the one the skeleton was pointing to. An idea sparked in your mind, a crazy, long shot of an idea. "Jian," you said, "move the artifact. Place it over the uncharted star on the map." She gave you a look, the kind of look that said you were definitely losing it. But she was a good officer. She picked up the stone. She moved it across the holographic display. As the stone passed over the glowing representation of Xylos, nothing happened. As it moved over other known stars, nothing happened. but when she placed it directly over the uncharted star, the bridge lights flickered. The artifact pulsed with a soft, internal light. A low hum filled the room. This time, everyone heard it. A single razor-thin line of light shot out from the stone. It connected the uncharted star to another, then another, and another. A glowing pathway appeared in the hologram. A road across the void, a trail leading into the deepest, darkest parts of the galaxy. The ship's computer worked for 3 days straight. It analyzed the artifact. It studied the strange, glowing path. John barely left the science lab. She survived on nutrient paste and pure stubbornness. Finally, she called you to her lab. She looked exhausted, but her eyes were bright with discovery. "I found something," she said. Her voice was electric. She pointed to a complex wave pattern on her main screen. "The artifact isn't just a key, it's a library. A very, very old one." She had managed to isolate a repeating data fragment. It was corrupted, degraded by time, but parts of it were readable. She hit a key. A synthesized voice, cold and ancient, spoke from the terminal. The words were distorted, but the language was unmistakable. It was an archaic dialect of Proto-Indo-European, the root of nearly all modern human languages. The voice spoke in broken phrases. "Children of the first earth," it whispered. "Scattered like seeds, a new sun." The message was poetry and mathematics mixed together. It spoke of a great journey, a desperate escape, a new beginning. It mentioned a first earth, a cradle of humanity now lost to time and memory. It spoke of a promise, a return that never happened. The message cut out, leaving only the soft hum of the lab equipment. You stared at the screen. "First Earth." The words echoed in your mind. Our history books said humanity evolved on Earth. That was our cradle, our only cradle. But this artifact, this message, it suggested something else. It suggested that our entire understanding of ourselves was wrong, that we were not from Earth, not originally. We were transplants, survivors of a world long gone. You made the decision. You had to follow the path. The crew agreed. The mystery was too deep to ignore. The Stargazer changed course. It left the Xylos system behind and plunged into the uncharted darkness, following the glowing road laid out by the alien stone. For weeks, you traveled through empty, silent space. The path was your only guide. Then, a new signal appeared. It was faint, almost lost in the cosmic background noise. But it was there. "Magnify it," you ordered the comms officer. He adjusted the filters. The signal grew stronger. It was a looping message, a repeating burst of data. It was a distress call. The officer's hands flew across his console. He isolated the signal's carrier wave. He ran it through the translation matrix. A moment later, he looked up from his screen. His face was ashen. "Captain, it's human." The voice that came through the speakers was weak, fading, full of static. But it was a human voice, a woman, speaking in that same ancient language from the artifact. "Mayday, Mayday," the voice pleaded. "They have found us. The sky is falling. The architects are gone." The message repeated, over and over. A ghost crying out in the wilderness of space, 100,000-year-old SOS. It was the most lonely sound you had ever heard. The crew on the bridge was frozen, listening to the echo of a long-dead civilization, a civilization that was human, and that had been destroyed. "Trace the signal," you said, your voice low and tight. "Take us to the source." There was no discussion, no debate. You were no longer just explorers. You were answering a call for help, even if you were 100 millennia too late. The journey to the signal source took another week. The distress call grew stronger with every light year. Finally, you arrived. Your ship dropped out of warp into normal space, and you all saw it. Floating in the black, a structure. It was massive, so large it blocked out the distant stars. It was not a planet, not a station. It was something else. A tomb. It was built from a material that seemed to drink the light. A silent black monolith in the shape of a complex crystal. It was clearly artificial. But it was also clearly dead. No lights, no energy readings, no communications. Just the faint, repeating distress call, echoing from its cold, silent heart. It was the graveyard of the people who sent the call. The tomb of the architects they mentioned. You ordered the ship to approach slowly, cautiously. This was a place of immense sadness, a monument to a forgotten tragedy. As the stargazer drew closer, something happened. A section of the colossal structure began to glow. A soft blue light pulsed from deep within. Lines of energy spread across its dark surface, like veins coming to life. On the bridge, alarms blared. "Energy spike!" Jian yelled. "Something is waking up." A powerful, focused beam of energy shot out from the structure. It washed over your ship. But it wasn't an attack. It was a scan. A deep, penetrating probe of your systems, your history, your biology. Then, a new voice spoke. Not over the comms, but directly inside your head. It was calm, ancient, and powerful. "Hello, children," it said. "We have been waiting for you." An artificial mind, the keeper of this place. It had awakened, and it recognized you. The AI called itself Caretaker. It explained everything. The voice in your mind was patient. It showed you images, data streams, histories that felt like dreams. The architects were a race of beings almost as old as the galaxy. They were explorers, builders, philosophers. They had watched life blossom on a million worlds. They found early humanity on a planet you did not recognize, a world it called the First Earth. This First Earth was dying. Its sun was expanding, roasting the planet. The primitive humans who lived there were doomed to extinction. They were a clever species, full of potential. But they were trapped. The architects decided to intervene. It was against their most sacred laws. But they could not stand by and watch your ancestors perish. So they saved them. They gathered a small population of early humans. They put them into a deep cryosleep. And they carried them across the stars. They searched for a new home, a world that was perfect for humanity to grow. They found our Earth. It was young, full of life, and safe. They seeded humanity there. They gave your ancestors a second chance, a new cradle, and then they left, erasing all evidence of their intervention, hoping humanity would grow and thrive on its own. The truth was staggering. Everything you knew was a lie. Your species was not born of Earth. You were refugees, adopted children of a benevolent alien race. The mood on the bridge was heavy. People stared into space, trying to process this new reality. You asked the caretaker the obvious question, the one that hung in the air like a shroud. Why did the architects leave? Why did they hide? The caretaker's mental voice grew somber. They were not exploring, it explained. They were running. It showed you new images, darker ones, fleets of ships that were not ships. They were living creatures of metal and hate. It showed worlds turned to glass, stars extinguished, civilizations erased from existence in the blink of an eye. "There is an enemy," the caretaker said. a predator that hunts on a cosmic scale. It seeks out thinking life, and it destroys it without mercy, without exception. The architects had been discovered. The enemy was hunting them. They brought humanity to Earth to hide you, to give you a chance to survive the coming darkness. They built this tomb, this fortress of knowledge, as a final sanctuary, a last resort. And then they faced their foe, and they were lost. The distress call you followed was their last gasp, a warning and a hope that their seeded children would one day find this place. The caretaker fell silent for a long moment. The weight of its grief was a palpable force in your mind. Then it spoke again. The enemy is still out there, it said. It is patient. It is relentless. Sooner or later, it will find Earth. It will find humanity. And it will finish what it started. This was the terrible inheritance. This was the reason for the secrecy. Humanity had been saved from one extinction, only to be placed in the path of another. The silence on your bridge was absolute. The crew looked to you, their faces filled with fear, and a new, terrible resolve. What could you do? What could one small ship do against an enemy that consumed entire civilizations? The caretaker seemed to hear your thoughts. The architects did not leave you defenseless, it said. This place is not a tomb. It is an archive, an armory. The AI offered you a choice. It could transfer the architect's knowledge directly into your ship's computers, their science, their technology, their understanding of the universe. It was a power beyond human imagination, a power that could give you a fighting chance. But it came with a price. The knowledge would show you the enemy in perfect detail. It would show you the horrors they had committed. The burden of that knowledge would be immense. It could break you. It could break your entire species. You looked at the faces of your crew. You saw the same thing in every pair of eyes. There was no choice. Not really. Do it, you said. The download began. A river of light flowed from the ancient monolith to the stargazer. Your ship's systems screamed, overloaded with data 1,000 times more complex than they were designed for. Alarms blared and then went silent as the new knowledge rewrote everything. It felt like hours, but it was only a few minutes. When it was done, the stargazer was no longer just an exploration vessel. It was something more. It was the inheritor of a lost legacy, the sole guardian of a terrible truth. The journey home was long and quiet. The stargazer felt different. The walls hummed with a new energy. The systems responded before you even spoke a command. The architect knowledge had integrated itself. Your small ship was now the most advanced piece of technology in human history. But the mood was not celebratory. It was somber, heavy. You and your crew were the only humans who knew the truth. You knew that your species was living on borrowed time, on a stolen world. You found yourself staring out at the stars for hours. They no longer looked like points of light. They looked like hiding places, like dark forests full of unseen predators. You spent hours in the data archive, looking at the files the caretaker had given you. You saw the enemy, the swarms of biomechanical ships, the way they consumed planets, the cold, calculated efficiency of their genocide. You saw the fall of the architects, a war that lasted for millennia, a war the good guys lost. You tried to keep the mood light. You shared meals with the crew in the mess hall. You told bad jokes. Rostova, the stoic sergeant, even managed a small smile once. She said your jokes were almost as bad as the nutrient paste, which from her was a high compliment. But the humor was a thin bandage over a deep wound. Everyone was changed. You were all carrying the same weight, the knowledge of the coming storm. You were no longer explorers. You were heralds. You were soldiers in a war that hadn't even started yet. The fate of everyone you had ever known rested on your shoulders. It was a terrifying, crushing weight. You had nightmares every time you slept, nightmares filled with falling skies and silent screams. As you got closer to the Sol system, the final debate began. What do you tell Earth? How do you deliver a message that will rewrite every religion, every history book, every sense of human identity? Rostova argued for the full truth. They need to know what's coming, she said. We need to be ready, united. Jian disagreed. The truth will shatter us, she argued. It will cause panic, war. Our civilization could tear itself apart before the enemy even arrives. We should keep it secret. Use the architect technology to prepare in the shadows. They both had valid points. If you revealed the truth, you risked chaos. If you kept it secret, you carried the burden alone. You would be lying to your entire species, forging a future based on a hidden truth. The decision was yours. You were the captain. You had to make the call. The weight of 8 billion lives rested on your choice. You were just a few days from home. The familiar light of Sol was a welcome sight. You had made your decision. You would deliver the truth. But you would do it carefully. You would contact the highest levels of government first. You would present the evidence, the bones, the artifact, the ship's logs, the architect data. You would build a coalition of trust before going public. It was a risky plan, but it was the only one that felt right. Humanity deserved to know its own story, no matter how terrifying it was. Suddenly, a new alarm chimed. A soft, melodic tone you had never heard before. It was a sound generated by the new architect sensor systems, a system designed to see things that were designed not to be seen. On the main view screen, a new icon blinked into existence. It was in the Oort cloud, the vast, dark edge of your home system. It was a single, stealth contact, hiding in the darkness. The computer cross-referenced the contact's energy signature with the architect database. A match was found instantly. A red light flashed on the screen. A single word appeared next to the icon. Enemy. The caretaker had been wrong about one thing. The predator wasn't coming. It was already here, waiting.